Well, hello there. My name is Jason, and I wanted to share a video about my experience with sound sensitivity or hyperacusis. I also believe what I had was pain hyperacusis, or what they call Noxacusis, or however you pronounce it. But when I was going through this, I was reading stories on Reddit. I was reading stories on different forums that just broke my heart. And in that time, it was, breaking my heart even more because I was going through it. And I think that was also feeding the issue that I had. I'm going to share my story. I know everybody's story is different. I do firmly believe that my hyperacusis was mental health related and not as a result of sound exposure. So I will caveat everything that I'm talking about today with the fact that I now firmly believe what I had experienced was the result of panic attacks and obsessive compulsive disorder. So mine started around August of 2024. I was with a friend. We were driving, and I had noticed that my ears just felt like pressure, or, just felt uncomfortable when I was talking. And I really wasn't paying attention too much to it, but I started to get really car sick. And then, long story short, I got car sick, and then I was driving, and all of a sudden I thought what I was having was a heart attack. I thought I was dying. My heart started racing. I started to feel like I was going to faint. I had to pull over, and they called an ambulance. The ambulance took me to the hospital, and they informed me that I had had a panic attack. I'd never experienced anything like that before. So I left there feeling encouraged, and I went home, but I kept having this pressure right around here in my head and in my jaw, and in my ears. And it was really throwing me off with just mentally. I was having trouble eating. I didn't want to do things, and because I just kept focusing on it. And so one day I got the great idea that I was going to go to the ER and have them scan my head, because I thought maybe there was something going on inside my head that was causing all of this. And so they gave me a CT scan. And while I was there, the doctor had given me some medicine that I had a really bad reaction to. It was called Compazine. And apparently they give it to people that have migraines. That immediately gave me another panic attack because it caused my heart to race. And I just felt awful when I left the ER. They didn't find anything. And that is when I would say was the pivotal point when my mental health spiraled out of control. After that second panic attack. I was having a hard time sleeping. I wasn't eating. And I still thought there was something wrong with my heart or my cardiovascular system. So I went and had all the tests done. Everything came back normal. And I had decided that I was going to try antidepressants. And so they put me on Zoloft. Had a really bad experience with it. It gave me even more senses and feelings of panic. And so I had to stop that. But I woke up one morning and I went to watch a video on my phone. It was like the news or something, and I couldn't watch it. My ears were just felt terrible. It like made me dizzy. My ears felt like they were vibrating, and it was painful. And it felt like somebody was poking my eardrums, and I couldn't comprehend what was going on. And so I started to do research, started to read Reddit forums, and everything that I was experiencing was sound that included silverware, dishes, running water, any, dogs barking, any sharp noise was causing me to have a reaction like somebody was poking my eardrums. And so when I started digging into the forums is when I really started to freak out, because I just read some terrible stories that broke my heart. And I always told myself that if I came out the other side of this, that I would share my success to give others hope, because you feel so hopeless when you're going through this. You feel like you're going to be this way forever. And you read stories where people have, been experiencing this for years, and my heart just breaks for them. And so I made the decision that if I ever came out on the other end of this, that I would share my story and that it would give others hope. So that is when my hyperacusis had really began. I had gone to ENTs. They did tests on my ears, which they blew air in them. They did all these different tests and they played loud noises in them, and it just made me worse. I probably in October, the end of October, I think it was around Halloween 2024, was when I really nosedived into what I would consider full-fledged pain hyperacusis. I started to experience burning sensations in my ear. I started to experience tremendous amounts of pressure, almost like it would start as like a cooling feeling, and then it would turn into this intense burning that was just so painful. And it just dealt a blow to my mental health because I was focusing on every little sound. I was avoiding every sound. I couldn't ride in cars. I think everything is subjective in everyone's experience. How bad was I? I don't know what you would classify it as. However, I was not able to take showers. I had to take baths, and even the water splashing was painful. It got so bad at a certain point that when I tore the toilet paper, the act of tearing toilet paper was painful. And I was isolated. I could not leave the house. I was wearing double ear protection when I rode in cars. So when we, over the Christmas holiday, we had gone on a family trip to Tennessee. I did not want to go because I was afraid I was just going to make it worse. And I wore earplugs and over the ear earphones, whatever you call them. So I was in pretty bad shape. I was suicidal. Every day I didn't want to live. I woke up every morning feeling like, oh my gosh, I have to live another day through this hell, because sound is everywhere. You can't avoid it. I have 2 little boys. I have a wife, and my 2 little boys are rambunctious. They're loud. They scream. My wife has to scream at them sometimes. And all of that noise was just spiraling me out of control. I was refusing medication because of my experience, because of things that I had read online on forums that medication was just going to make me worse. And so I was in a really bad place around the Thanksgiving, Christmas time frame. And my wife got together with some friends, and they came to me and they said, hey, you're going to have to do something different. You're going to have to get help because what you're doing is not working. And looking back, they were right. I was refusing any medication. I was refusing anything, any help. And what I was doing was not working. I was only getting worse. And so there's a few things that I believed have helped me overcome this issue. And it was very slow progress. And, I discovered, because during my panic attack, the doctor had given me like a short dose of Xanax. And I was reading on some Reddit forums, which once you decide what path you're going to take to try to heal, I would highly encourage you to avoid all Reddit, all forums, because you'll read other people's story, and our brain is so powerful that I believe that when I was reading people's stories and what was happening to them, that I was actually experiencing those physical symptoms. And the physical symptoms are real. They're there, but I think we can wire our brain a certain way to convince ourselves that we have something, and it will actually start to cause physical symptoms or compound physical symptoms that you already have. And so I started to do that. I started to spiral. And so I would highly encourage you, once you've decided which path you're going to take to try to heal, that you avoid forums. So back to the Xanax, I had broken down and decided, hey, this isn't working. I'm going to try to take one of these Xanax to see if it helps. And I took it, and I noticed a little bit of improvement. The doctor suggested that I take one in the morning and one in the afternoon. And so by the afternoon, I took another one. And that is when I had my aha moment, because it completely took away all my sound sensitivity. I felt 100%. I could live life 100%. And I started to, again, do research on why that was the case. And I came across a couple different Reddit users that, one of them I believe was by the name of Ollie, Olly, and he shared a story about how this is mind-body syndrome. And I started to research that. I read this book, The Pain-Free You, and I really started to be convinced based on all the symptoms of mind-body syndrome, of the Pain-Free You, that my issue was in my brain. And I want to caveat again, I'm not saying that's the case for everyone, but I think there is hope for people that are experiencing this as part of an anxiety condition that includes attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, that includes obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety, I think can wreak havoc on our minds. That's what I've been convinced of as I've gone through this process, and I'll explain more why that's the case. So through trying the Xanax and realizing that there's maybe something mental, because Xanax suppresses the central nervous system. And so when it went away due to suppressing the central nervous system, I thought, in reading other forum articles from folks like Ollie and Mind-Body Syndrome and this book, The Pain-Free You, I decided that was the path I was going to take. But in order to do that, I needed some help. And my family sort of said, hey, you're either going to get help or we're going to, check you in, because I was that mental. I was that isolated. Like I said, I could not function. I couldn't ride in cars. I couldn't take showers. I couldn't do the dishes. I couldn't be around dishes. I couldn't be in the same room as other people without wearing over-the-ear earphones. And I was just spiraling very rapidly to where sound was very rapidly taking control of my life and taking over, where I was avoiding all sound. The vent above our bed that blows air at night, I would put cotton balls in my ears to sleep at night. It just got crazy, and my mental health was terrible. Again, I was suicidal. So my family was really concerned. And I was refusing help. I became paranoid. All of the things I read online about drugs were going to make me worse, and it was just bad. The other thing I forgot to mention is I also, when all this started, I started to have tinnitus, or ear ringing, in my ears as well, and that's still there. It's not bad, but it got really bad. I mean, the ear ringing and the hyperacusis combined was just horrible. And so I decided to get help around after the holidays, around the January timeframe, and I did two things. I set up an appointment with a therapist who deals with anxiety, and I decided to meet with a psychiatrist. And I went into that with the mindset, and I'm not saying this will work for everyone, but I went into that with the mindset that I was going to relinquish all control, and I was going to follow whatever they told me. I don't know if you're faith-based or if you believe in God, but I was at the point where I had nothing else left, and I sort of submitted myself fully to God and said, put people in my life that are going to help me, and I'm going to listen to whatever it is that they tell me to do. And that's exactly what I did, starting in January of 2025. Seen the psychiatrist. I seen a lot of writings on Reddit forums about clomipramine. I was very opinionated. I wanted to take clomipramine to try it because I was so bad, and I had heard so many success stories. I'd actually taken a DNA test to see which medications would work well with how my body works. Some people don't believe in those, but it did highlight that the Zoloft was not something that I should take because I had a bad experience with it. I kind of was like, maybe this DNA test is really exposing things. So, but it showed I could take clomipramine and I would be, my body would process it well as other things like Prozac. And so I met with this psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist said, "You're going to have to trust me." And so I just felt like of everything that I'd been praying for, God was telling me that I just needed to trust him. And then the psychiatrist said, "Hey, you're just going to have to trust me." And I know that's going to sound crazy to some of you guys that have had a really bad experience with doctors and psychiatrists and therapists. So, including ENTs. Like, again, I'm caveating this all with, this is my story. I'm not a doctor. I'm not telling you to do this, but I just want to encourage you and tell you there is hope. So the psychiatrist, I met with him, he said, "You're going to have to trust me." And I wanted clomipramine, and he said, "No, we're going to put you on Prozac." And I cried. I was like, this isn't going to help. I'm going to go through this, and it's just going to make me worse. But I had nothing else left. And so I just completely relinquished control. And he said, they diagnosed me with obsessive compulsive disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So it all made sense once my mind started to get clear that the OCD was compounding my issues because I was hyper-focused on sound and avoiding all sound. And again, this is me personally. I won't say that anymore. And hopefully you've heard my caveats. And so his plan was to put me on a high dose, the highest dose of Prozac, 80 milligrams, and to titrate up to that. And I did that over a couple of months. And it was probably the first week I was on, I think, as low as 10 milligrams. And I started to notice something. I started to notice that I had hope again. My ears weren't better, but I started to feel more positive. It's kind of hard to describe. It didn't make my ear ringing worse, maybe a little bit, but that's since subsided. It didn't make my hyperacusis worse at this point. If anything, it slightly at 10 milligrams made it better. Then I went up to 20 milligrams, eventually 40 milligrams, and then 80. And we went up pretty rapidly. And his approach was to treat obsessive compulsive disorder. You have to go up pretty rapidly. And so once I got to 80, I actually started to notice improvements in my sound sensitivity. I started to become more confident in going places. I was able to go to indoor places. I was able to start going to restaurants, which just seems crazy to me now based on how I was feeling. I was starting to able to go back to church and sit in the entryway where they had TVs and I could watch from outside. I was able to start to live again. I was still using some earplugs to do certain things. So once I got to the 80 milligrams, I do a lot of fishing. So anytime I was on the boat, I put in earplugs. Anytime that I had to fly on a plane, and again, there was no flying on planes. There was no sitting on a plane. There was no sitting in a room full of people that sit on a plane. Like, I couldn't do any of that before. But once I got to 80 milligrams on Prozac, I was starting to expose myself. And the therapist, who was a godsend, was encouraging me and giving me tools like mindfulness, giving me tools like exposure therapy. I was listening to classical music on my laptop louder and louder and exposing myself to that, starting out at just a couple minutes a day and working myself all the way up to 15 minutes a day. And so that gave me a lot of hope. When I started to see improvement, it gave me a ton of hope. And I think if your condition is associated with mental health, and I don't know how to classify that. I'm not a doctor. I just relinquished all control to God and listened to the professionals and what they told me to do. And so if it's mental health, I think exposure therapy is something that can help. And so therapist was a godsend. I started off seeing a therapist twice a week because I couldn't function. We would do exposure therapy while I was there. It was very difficult. I would leave the therapist appointment and I started walking in places. Like, I would go get gas and I would walk into the gas station and walk around, like forcing myself to expose, but obviously not just jumping in and going to a concert. Like, I don't think that would have been helpful. And so I'm on the 80 milligrams of Prozac. I started to have flushing feelings in about midsummer when it was hot out. The psychiatrist said this was a result of as a symptom of Prozac when it's high humidity and high heat. So he put me on a low dose of what they call clonidine, not to be confused with Klonopin. It's not a benzodiazepine. It's a blood pressure medication that helps with anxiety and helps relieve some of that flushing feeling. And so I was on 80 milligrams of Prozac, and I was on a morning and evening dose of clonidine at the lowest dose. It made me really tired, which I didn't like. But once I was able to get rid of the flushing feeling, and I was on the 80 milligram Prozac for about, I think it took probably 4 or 5 months, I really started to feel great. I was living my life. I was flying on planes. I was fishing on my boat. I was going to restaurants. I started off doing those things, wearing those loop earplugs that you put in your ears, that sort of tone down some of the decibels. But I started to slowly remove all that stuff. And again, I believe mine was all panic and obsessive compulsive disorder related. Looking back, I had a lot of obsessive compulsive disorder tendencies. I would do things over and over. I would go randomly during the day, go check the oil on my boat, and there was no reason to do that. It was just I would get a thought and I would have to do it. And so that's a clear indication of obsessive compulsive disorder. And so when I started to have the sound sensitivity, whether it was triggered by some type of sound exposure, whether it was mental health, however that occurred, my obsessive compulsive disorder, my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and my generalized anxiety was compounding it and causing it to spiral out of control. I went from last fall to weeping my life like I thought my life was over, to here I am now, I'm speaking to you. I ran a chainsaw yesterday without earplugs, like a gas chainsaw. I typically wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't suggest that. I had just forgot. I had forgot that I had sound sensitivity. And I think it's important to work up to that point. I went and put my earmuffs on after running the chainsaw for a little bit once I realized I didn't have earplugs in. But to go from not being able to tear toilet paper to running a chainsaw is phenomenal. I still take 80 milligrams of Prozac and clonidine twice a day. I forget to take the clonidine. I don't notice any difference. The goal is to be on the Prozac for a year, and we'll begin to start titrating down from that. But what I think it's allowed me to do is expose myself and tell my brain that sound is not dangerous, because my brain got wired to fear sound and to react to sound in a very negative manner. And so this is just a story of hope. You know, I have since done everything: fishing, flying on planes, running a chainsaw. I love working with my hands and doing projects. I'm back to doing all of that kind of stuff. And it's just silverware, dishes, all that stuff. None of that bothers me anymore. I only wear earplugs now when I am underway on my boat, or if I'm taking off and landing on a plane. Those are the only 2 times that I wear earplugs. I will also wear earplugs at church during worship. And to be honest with you, I don't worry about that, because that's probably a place you should be wearing earplugs anyways. And all of those, those are well beyond the decibel levels that can cause hearing damage. So I'm okay with that. And I can live. I can go to restaurants. I can go out with my family. I can go to fairs. I can go to carnivals. I can, I even went to Nashville, Tennessee. I wore earplugs, but I was at a concert. Like, it's amazing. It's a miracle. And so there is hope. And I would highly encourage you to try your hardest to hold on, because there's always hope, and that to see a professional, get off of forums, see a professional, get help, and speak with a therapist. I know some people are in some very terrible situations right now. Even as you're watching this, you're thinking there's no hope. But I've seen a lot of recovery stories for people that decided to start going and living their life and exposing themselves. And I wasn't getting any better. I was only getting worse, covering my ears. I was only getting worse, constantly worrying about it. I was only getting worse, refusing to take any medication because I was convinced by online forums that it was going to make me worse and the drugs were the devil. And people had those experiences, and I'm not trying to take that away from them. And my heart breaks for them. My heart breaks for you if you've tried all that and it hasn't worked, because this hyperacusis is pure torture. There's no other way to explain it than that it is absolute torture. There's one thing I also forgot to mention. I read a lot about TMJ. I sense this is a appliance for TMJ. I had a doctor diagnose me with, he said I had TMJ, and that could have been caused by all the anxiety and the tension. And so I wear this. That is maybe the third element that's helped here. I don't know, but I'm not looking back because whatever I'm doing is working. Exposing myself, taking antidepressants, and treating my TMJ. I'm just going to continue to do those things because they're working. I avoid forums now. I avoid reading anything about hyperacusis because I believe for me, that was compounding my issue. It was rewiring my brain to say there's something wrong with you, and you have this, and be afraid and turn on the pain signals. Again, I went from not being able to watch YouTube videos to full-on burning pain from sound, to not being able to take showers, to not being able to be around dishes or silverware or my children, not being able to travel, to now just yesterday, I got a new chainsaw and I forgot to put my earmuffs on, and I was running the chainsaw and it wasn't hurting, and I just forgot about it. I would say I am 95% recovered. Even talking to you right now, I feel a little something, but it doesn't scare me. I don't have a fear response to it anymore. There are days like yesterday, I running the chainsaw. I was 100%. I had no sound sensitivity, nothing. And so, yeah, I just want to encourage you. And I hope this brings someone hope. I hope this brings someone to fight for another day and to know that there is help out there. And yeah, so thank you for listening, and God bless you all. And I hope this is helpful. See you later.